My wife's investments failed, and she begged me to fake my own death to erase her debt. But on the day of the funeral, I peered through a hole in the coffin and saw something terrifying. My wife's first love was attending the funeral, and he was wearing my face. I heard the pastor's voice reciting a final prayer, calling out the name of her first love. My fake funeral had suddenly become his real one. The blood in my veins turned to ice, and a chill consumed me. It was then I realized my wife truly wanted me dead. I tried to struggle, but the coffin was nailed shut and my mouth was sealed with duct tape. In my horror and despair, her first love sneered at me through the small hole. "Sonny, Candy was never bankrupt. She did this on purpose so you would die in my place." I was buried alive, suffocating to death, the inside of the coffin lid covered in my bloody, desperate scratch marks. After I died, my wife's first love took my place, my wealth, and my reputation, while I was left in an unmarked grave in the middle of nowhere. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the night before the funeral. "What are you standing there for? Get in the coffin." My wife Candy's impatient voice snapped me back to reality. I looked around at the familiar setup of the funeral parlor. I suddenly realized what had happened. I had been reborn. In my previous life, Candy's investments had failed. I liquidated all my assets, but it still wasn't enough to cover the losses. Desperate, she had me sign an agreement taking on all the debt, planning for me to fake my death to make it all disappear. But on the day of the funeral, I learned the truth. Candy's plan was for me to die under the name of her first love, Ethan Cole. The memory of being buried alive, the pain and the hopelessness flooded back. I forced down my rage and managed to speak a single word. "Okay." A flicker of joy crossed Candy's face, but her voice was ice cold. "Just get comfortable in there. I made some chicken soup. I'll go get it for you from the kitchen." Candy turned and walked away. This time, I didn't just lie there waiting to die. I immediately covered my nose and mouth and sat up. I had assumed the chicken soup was what knocked me out last time, but as soon as I lay down, I realized the truth. The coffin had been doused with high-purity ether. Another minute or two, and I would have been unconscious, sealing the same fate I suffered in my past life. It was a truly vicious plan, but this time I saw through it. I followed Candy quietly to the kitchen. I wanted to see what she was plotting, but soon after she went inside, I heard panting sounds coming from the kitchen, growing louder and more intense. My expression darkened as I carefully pushed open a corner of the window to look inside. My wife was in there with her first love. "Candy, is that loser Sonny in the coffin yet?" "Of course, Ethan. He always does what I say. He's already lying down." Ethan Cole let out a triumphant laugh. "Perfect, baby. He's still stupid enough to believe you're in debt, with no idea that this is all to help me get my revenge on him." As Ethan's movements grew more intense, Candy's voice became a trembling, seductive moan. "Ethan, you can't blame me for what happened back then. He walked in on us in bed. He was so rich and powerful, I had no choice but to say you forced yourself on me. I never thought he'd pursue it so relentlessly and send you to prison for all those years. I've already doused the coffin with ether, so he should be out by now. Go tie him up and nail it shut. Once he's dead tomorrow, everything he has will be yours." As Candy cried out, Ethan looked up with a sinister smile. The cold moonlight illuminated his face, and I saw that it was identical to my own. I was consumed by rage, my heart aching with betrayal. The rape accusation from all those years ago, it was just a lie she concocted after I caught them together. And for the last 3 years, Candy used the excuse of severe psychological trauma from that incident. She refused to sleep with me. She would hit and scream at me, and she drove my company into the ground. I was physically and emotionally exhausted by her abuse, but I always endured it silently because I felt sorry for her. Even when she told me she was drowning in debt and begged me to fake my death to save her, I still agreed. I agreed to sacrifice everything without a second thought for the consequences. But I never could have imagined. My love, my sacrifice, my wealth. It was all just a set of tools for Candy to use in her quest for revenge on my behalf, all for her first love. I watched Ethan's back as he walked toward the funeral parlor. My eyes grew cold as I followed him. He wanted to pull a switcheroo? Fine, then I'll make sure this funeral for Ethan Cole becomes the real thing. Ethan walked into the parlor. He didn't open the coffin immediately, but stood beside it, his voice dripping with hateful sarcasm. "Sonny, you remember in that courtroom? I got on my knees and begged you to ask for a lighter sentence. But you just had to push the judge for the maximum penalty, making me waste the best years of my life in a cell. Now I'm the one getting rid of you, and it's exactly what you deserve." He put his hands on his hips and laughed at the ceiling, a cruel, smug look on his face. "Since I feel a little sorry for you, I'll let you in on a secret. That one time Candy slept with you in the last 3 years, that was on my orders. You got pretty lucky too, knocking her up with a healthy baby boy on the first try. But can you guess why she ended up having a miscarriage? It was when she came to visit me on a weekend pass from prison. To make me happy, she let me help her get rid of it, right then and there. Hiding in the shadows, I bit down so hard I could taste blood, my eyes burning with rage. So that was the real reason for the miscarriage. And I'd spent years blaming myself, thinking I hadn't taken good enough care of her. Even the most vicious animals don't kill their own young. How could they be so monstrous? Too bad you'll never get to tell anyone the truth, because you're about to die." Ethan lifted the coffin lid with a triumphant sneer. Inside there was nothing. His pupils contracted, his face instantly filled with panic. "Where is he?" The room was unnervingly silent. He swallowed hard and spun around. He came face to face with my furious, bloodshot eyes. He stumbled back a step, his own eyes wide with terror. "Sonny, how are you not in the coffin?" Years of pent-up rage erupted inside my chest like a volcano. I grabbed him by the hair and slammed his face into the edge of the wooden coffin. There was a sickening crack as his nose broke. Blood poured down Ethan's face. I didn't give him a chance to speak. As he stared in horror, I sealed his mouth with duct tape, bound his hands and body, and shoved him into the coffin. Ethan struggled wildly, his muffled cries filling the air. I couldn't get the lid on over his struggling. In the middle of our struggle, I heard Candy's sharp voice from behind me. "Sonny." I turned around. Candy was standing in the doorway holding a hammer, her face a mask of cold fury. Ethan's eyes lit up, and he glared at me with pure hatred, as if to say, "I'm saved, and you're dead." But I didn't even glance at him. Instead, I turned back to Candy, affecting a different tone. "Candy, it's me, Ethan." She paused for a second, then rushed over and took my arm. "Ethan, the resemblance is so perfect. I didn't even recognize you for a second." Ethan's body went rigid. He stared at me in utter disbelief, his muffled struggles growing more frantic. But Candy, looking annoyed, swung the hammer down hard. "Shut up." There was a sharp crack of bone. Ethan curled up like a shrimp dropped in boiling water, writhing in pain inside the coffin. Candy looked down at him, her voice devoid of any emotion. "Sonny, I was going to use the ether to make it painless for you. Why couldn't you just appreciate my kindness?" I was smiling, but my heart felt like a block of ice. I knew exactly what was happening. She thought Ethan was me, which is why she had just shattered his jaw with a hammer. Candy expressionlessly took out a cloth, likely soaked in more ether, and pressed it over Ethan's face. His struggles ceased almost immediately. She turned back to me with a smile. "Put the lid on, so I can nail Sonny in for good." I watched as she, without a moment's hesitation, drove nail after nail, sealing Ethan inside. My gaze turned colder still. In my last life, she had done the same to me, tricking me into the coffin, sealing my fate, and burying me alive. But this time, she had no idea she was sealing away her precious first love. I couldn't wait to see the look on her face when she finally discovered the truth. The funeral was held in a chapel at the mortuary. By the time Candy and I arrived, the service was already wrapping up. There was no atmosphere of grief in the room. The few relatives who had come to mourn Ethan were clearly in on the plan. They actually smiled and waved when they saw Candy and me. "After today, you two can finally be a proper couple. That bastard Sonny really held you back for too long." Candy gave me a happy look and squeezed my hand tightly. "Ethan, we're about to be together for real. Aren't you happy?" I remained silent for a moment, then forced a smile. "Candy, did you ever think that maybe we didn't have to take things this far? If you had just asked Sonny for a divorce, he would have agreed." Candy frowned. "Ethan, stop it. Don't be angry. Are you still upset about me accusing you all those years ago?" The only reason I didn't divorce him was so I could plan all this to get everything for you as compensation. As she spoke, Candy pulled a gold credit card from her purse and handed it to me. Here, this is what I've been quietly siphoning from Sonny's accounts for the past 3 years. Are you happy now, Ethan? My hand trembled as I took the card. I started to laugh, and a single tear rolled down my cheek. Oh, I was happy, Candy. I was so happy about how stupid I'd been for the last 3 years. I was stupid enough to believe in love, to never question why you were spending so much money. I just assumed it was retail therapy because you were still traumatized from the assault. For your fake debt, I even sold my family's ancestral home. Do you have any idea what that meant? Before my grandfather died, he made me promise one thing. He said that house was our family's roots and that I should never, ever sell it. But for you, Candy, I was willing to be a disgrace to my family's name. I sold it without a second thought. And what did I get in return? Your naked betrayal and humiliation. My chest was a storm of fury. I stared at the coffin that held Ethan and said, Candy, I forgive him. Let's not bury him. Let's have him cremated. The coffin suddenly began to shake violently. The few people around us exchanged glances but chose to ignore it. Then, a loud voice boomed from behind me. Cremation is a great idea. A rapist deserves nothing less. I turned in surprise. My father-in-law, Robert, was here. He walked over to the coffin. This animal caused my daughter so much pain. Just dying is getting off too easy. Although Robert was supposedly cursing Ethan, I could tell from the wink he gave me that he was an accomplice. He was really cursing me, Sonny. But I couldn't understand why. Why did he hate me? I had never done anything to offend him. In fact, I treated him with the respect due to my own father. Just then, Robert gave the coffin a subconscious push. A look of surprise crossed his hateful face, and he pushed it again, less certain this time. This coffin, the weight feels a little off. At his words, the coffin began to shake violently again, as if the person inside was thrilled to be discovered. Robert's expression was a mixture of shock and suspicion. He looked from me to the coffin, then suddenly asked a startling question. Could it be that the person in this coffin isn't Sonny? Everyone in the room started and looked at me. Candy hissed at her father in a low voice. Dad, what are you talking about? I locked him in there myself last night. There's no mistake. You know, Ethan saved my life. If I actually locked him in a coffin to die, how could I live with myself? But the suspicion in Robert's eyes didn't fade. I built this coffin myself. I had Sonny lie in it before to test the fit, and this weight is definitely not the same. Something's wrong. Robert's eyes narrowed, and he moved to open the coffin and check the body. Dad, are you really going to back out now? Candy shot her father a furious look. As soon as he's in the incinerator, everything Sonny has will be ours, and Ethan will be able to live as him. There are people outside. What happens if you let a living, breathing Sonny make a scene? I seized the opportunity to add my own voice. Candy's right. This is the most critical moment for me to assume his identity. We can't afford any complications. Robert glanced around at the curious stares we were getting. You're right. To be safe, let's take him to be cremated now. Ethan began to struggle violently inside the coffin again. Candy rushed over and poured a large bottle of ether through a breathing hole. Soon, the coffin fell silent. Candy stared at the coffin, her expression calm as she muttered, Sonny, don't blame me. Love is about who was there first. You have no idea what Ethan gave up to save me when I was a little girl. You're the one who sent him to prison. That was your mistake. In your next life, learn not to cross him. Hearing this, something felt wrong. I remembered the first time I met Ethan, when he and Candy were already acting incredibly close. I had done a background check on him back then. Ethan grew up overseas, while Candy had never left the country as a child. How could he possibly have saved her when they were kids? I, on the other hand, had spent time at my grandfather's house in the mountains as a boy. My father and I once rescued a father and daughter who had gotten lost. While saving the little girl, I slipped and fell from a ledge, breaking my leg. My own father drowned in the process. Thinking of this, I looked at Candy. Then I looked at the man I had treated like a father for nearly a decade. I remembered how he was the one who had planted the idea in my head, telling me Candy had been assaulted in that hotel, that it wasn't an affair. He obviously knew who Ethan was. He must have known about his relationship with Candy. So why would he lie? My expression turned to ice. I just couldn't understand it. Why do they all want me dead? Before they pushed the coffin toward the incinerator, an attendant opened it to remove the body. Robert's brow furrowed deeply. He stepped forward and placed a hand on the body, as if testing its weight. He turned to Candy, looking like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Candy told him impatiently to just spit it out. Robert gave me a long, hard look, then whispered to her, "Candy, the weight of this body is wrong. It's too light. I'm going to lift the sheet and look." Candy quickly grabbed his arm, her voice tense. "Dad, are you insane? People will get suspicious." Their argument drew a confused look from the attendant. Robert's face was a mask of conflict, but he didn't dare lift the sheet. I had to stop myself from laughing. Of course he didn't dare. They were about to cremate a living person. If they were discovered, their whole scheme would be exposed. In the end, Robert could only watch with suspicion as Ethan's body was loaded into the incinerator. With a loud whoosh, the furnace ignited. Thick black smoke billowed up as the flames consumed Ethan's body. Candy pulled me and her father over to the small observation window, her voice filled with excitement. "Sonny, this is what you owed Ethan, and it's what you owed me." But Robert was staring intently into the flames. Suddenly, a flash of silver glinted inside the furnace. Robert's eyes widened in shock. "The bracelet! Candy, the bracelet you gave Ethan is in there." He pointed a trembling finger at the window, his voice a horrified shout. "The person in there is Ethan. It's our Ethan we were supposed to protect." Candy's face went white, and she immediately denied it. "No, Dad, you must have seen it wrong." But a moment later, as the temperature inside climbed higher, what was left of Ethan's flesh melted away. The bracelet fell free from the bone. The initials of Candy's name engraved on the inside were now clearly visible. Candy whipped her head around to look at me in horror. "It really is Ethan." Robert's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed to the floor, letting out a choked cry. Candy's face was ashen. She stumbled backward, shaking her head in frantic disbelief. "Impossible. How could this happen?" Her wild, unfocused eyes met mine. I gave her a slow, deliberate smile. Her face froze as if she'd been slapped, the horror in her eyes deepening with every second. A blood-curdling scream tore from her throat. "No!" Candy threw herself against the furnace's iron door, clawing at it until her fingers bled. "Ethan, my Ethan! You have to stop it! Stop it now! You've got the wrong person. He's not dead. He's not dead." The attendant glanced at the name on his clipboard and tried to calm her down. "Please, ma'am, sir, don't joke around like that. I'd lose my job if I cremated the wrong person. The death certificate clearly says Ethan Cole. There's no mistake." Robert screamed, completely breaking down. "Open the furnace now." The attendant, clearly used to such scenes, spoke calmly. "Sir, you have to understand, there's a separation between the living and the dead. He's just moved on to a better place a little sooner than expected. You'll see him again one day. There's no need for such grief. Besides, the furnace is at 2,000 degrees. It was instantaneous. He felt no pain." The attendant turned a dial, increasing the intensity of the flames. Ethan's remaining bones crumbled instantly into ash. The attendant then said, "You can wait outside now. We'll collect the ashes for you once they've cooled." As Candy was escorted out, she was still screaming in anguish. A small crowd had gathered, and they began to whisper, "Did her parents pass away? The poor girl is crying her heart out. Wow, she must have been a very devoted daughter." "Devoted? You don't know the story. The man in there is the one who assaulted her years ago. Instead of celebrating, she's having a breakdown. I think she must have some kind of syndrome or something. Weird." I patted Candy on the shoulder and delivered the final, soul-crushing blow. "Candy, it's me, Ethan. The show's over. You can stop acting now." Candy trembled with rage, her teeth clenched, and she screamed at me. "Sonny, you knew this whole time, didn't you? You did this on purpose. You did this deliberately." Robert glared at me with murder in his eyes. "You little bastard, I'll kill you." He was an old man. He was no match for someone my age who stays in shape. I sidestepped easily, and he tumbled to the ground. I looked down at them both, but I felt no satisfaction. If fate hadn't given me this second chance, I would be the one suffering today. "Dad, Candy, what are you two talking about? What did I supposedly do on purpose? Candy was sobbing, overcome with grief. You're the one who killed Ethan. Watching her mourn for her lover like this, I burst into wild, manic laughter. This was the woman I had loved for 10 years. Candy, I roared. Did I kill him? Don't you forget, you're the one who smashed his jaw. You're the one who nailed the coffin shut. And you're the one who pushed the button to start the fire. You killed Ethan with your own 2 hands. I didn't do a thing. Candy lunged at me, grabbing my shirt, her eyes blazing with hatred. You tricked me. You knew all along. You must have known. You set this trap for me today, didn't you? I shoved her away from me, sending her sprawling to the floor. I looked down at her in disgust and shouted back. Candy, why are you even pretending at this point? You think I set a trap for him? From the very beginning, wasn't it you, your father Robert, your whole family, who conspired to murder me? The onlookers all gasped, their shocked and confused eyes darting between the 3 of us. Robert's face was flushed with rage. You little animal, I'm going to kill you. But as Robert struggled to his feet, he took 2 steps, swayed, and then collapsed to the ground, convulsing. It looked like the sheer rage had given him a stroke. Dad! Candy let out a piercing scream. Someone called 911. We rushed to the hospital. The doctor told us Robert's rage had caused a brain hemorrhage and he needed emergency surgery. They also discovered he was anemic. As his daughter, Candy went to donate blood for him. I stood by the window, smoking one cigarette after another, a pile of butts growing at my feet. When I turned around, Candy was out of the donation room. She was sitting on a bench in the hallway outside the ER, holding her head in her hands, muttering to herself. Ethan, I let out a cold, humorless laugh. If you loved him so much, where were you before? What's the point of chanting his name now that he's dead? My words ignited Candy's fury. Before I could react, she shot up and slapped me hard across the face. The sharp crack of the slap echoed down the empty hallway. The stinging humiliation filled me with rage. But before I could do anything, Candy pointed a finger in my face, her voice shaking with anger. Sonny, do you have any idea what love is? Do you know how much Ethan meant to me? To save me, he was permanently injured, and his father drowned. You killed him, and now you're standing here making sarcastic comments. How can you be so cruel? The familiar story made me fall silent. Candy's face began to merge with the memory of a little girl I once knew, crying because she was lost and scared. My anger faltered. Candy, I just want to know one thing. Did you fall in love with Ethan just because he saved you? Her voice was cold. Yes. I let out a sad laugh. Then what about me? If your heart already belonged to someone else, why did you date me in college? Why did you accept my marriage proposal? Candy fell silent and looked away. I understood her expression perfectly. I closed my eyes, the pain sharp, and answered for her. It was because you couldn't find him, and I had been pursuing you since college. Out of all your suitors, I was the most successful, the one who treated you the best. I was your best option after you weighed all the pros and cons, wasn't I? Candy opened her mouth to argue, but then said nothing. It was tragically laughable. I had imagined countless reasons for why Candy would cheat on me, but I never once thought it would be because someone else had accidentally taken the credit for something I did. And that had won her heart. The irony was that she didn't trust me, the man she married, but she trusted Ethan completely. I laughed until tears streamed down my face. Any good memories I had left of us shattered like glass. Candy, what if I told you that the person who saved you all those years ago wasn't Ethan? What if I told you it was me? Candy flinched as if struck, her head snapping up in shock. What are you talking about? She saw the look in my bloodshot eyes. Her expression faltered, and the rest of her protest died on her lips. But her expression quickly hardened again, her voice returning to its familiar cold, disgusted tone. Oh, I get it, Sonny. Is this fun for you? Mocking me like this? My father told me himself that Ethan was the one who saved me. How could that be a lie? I spoke softly. Miller's Hollow, near Blue Ridge Summit. That's my family's hometown. My father and I used to visit when my grandfather was still alive. And one day, I happened to come across a father and daughter, tourists who had gotten lost. Candy's eyes were wide with disbelief. How could that be possible? Are you trying to tell me that the person I destroyed was the one I should have loved all along? Stop trying to turn me against my father. Why would he lie to me about something like that? I answered her with cold fury. Candy, your father was the one who sent me the text message telling me you had been assaulted by Ethan in that hotel. Candy froze, looking as if she had been struck by lightning. At that exact moment, a nurse called out from the operating room. Family of Robert Hayes, the blood you donated isn't a match. Are you sure you're his biological relatives? Not related? Candy's eyes were filled with confusion. She asked automatically, What do you mean, not related? He's my father. Why can't he take my blood? The nurse gave her a strange look. We recommend using blood from our bank for now, and you might want to get a paternity test. Candy stood there, completely frozen. The man she had called Dad for over 20 years, and now a stranger was telling her he wasn't her biological father. The world started to spin, and Candy felt her legs give out. She forced herself to stay upright and immediately requested a paternity test. The results came back. She and Robert Hayes shared no biological connection. She wasn't Robert Hayes' daughter at all. Candy sank to the floor, her eyes empty, tears pouring down her cheeks. How can this be possible? I'm not his biological daughter. She looked up at me, her eyes lost and confused as I stood there smoking. Sonny, you already knew, didn't you? I answered coldly. No. Candy just stared at me blankly. Then, as if a thought suddenly struck her, a look of pure panic crossed her face. She scrambled over to me like a mad woman and frantically pulled at my pant leg. She stopped when she saw it, the long, ugly scar that ran the length of my thigh. Candy's face trembled, and she froze completely, as if turned to stone. Her eyes instantly filled with tears. It was you. It was really you who saved me. I kicked her away from me. Get lost. Candy scrambled back towards me, her face a mess of panic. Sunny, She was stammering, completely at a loss. My dad lied to me, Sonny. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Her pathetic, self-pitying excuses made the rage inside me explode. I finally let it out. You didn't mean it? Candy, do you have any self-awareness at all about what you've done to me? You cheated on me for years and made me a laughingstock. You stole my family's money and tormented me with one excuse after another. To cover your fake debts, I sold my family home. And how did you repay me? You lied and told me Ethan had assaulted you. I dropped everything, all my work, to hire lawyers and fight for you, to get justice for you, to send him to prison. And what was my reward? You blamed me for ruining the happiness of you and your lover. You deliberately got rid of my child, our child, with him, as some kind of sick, cruel revenge against me. Candy, that was your child too. How could you ever expect me to forgive you for that? Fear finally appeared in Candy's eyes, which were now swimming with tears. She abandoned all pride and dignity, clinging to my leg and sobbing. Sonny, I was tricked, I swear. Everything I did that hurt you, I did it because I love you. I was so furious I had to laugh. So what you're saying is, I should forgive you? I should stay with a woman who tried to murder her husband and killed her own child? Candy, why don't you ask yourself the real question? Were you sleeping with Ethan, really, just because you thought he was the one who saved you? If I wasn't your savior, would my 10 years of devotion have meant nothing to you? Did you ever love me? Or just the idea of a hero you had in your head? Candy just sobbed, clutching my leg tighter. Sonny, I was wrong. Please don't leave me. Get lost. Seeing the absolute coldness in my eyes, Candy began to panic, her voice turning into a desperate plea. Sonny, I'll take responsibility for everything. I just want to come back to you. Please, just let me come back. But my expression remained unchanged. We're getting a divorce. We are done. The door to the operating room opened again. A doctor emerged, smiling, and told us that Robert was no longer in critical condition. He was awake, and we could go in to see him. Candy, furious and broken, stormed into the room and screamed at the man in the bed. Why did you lie to me? Robert lay weakly in the hospital bed, but when his eyes found me in the corner, they filled with undiminished rage. You animal. Candy slapped him across the face. Answer me. Why would you do this to me? Robert was stunned. Candy, why did you hit me? Our enemy is standing right over there. Sonny is the enemy. Candy was shaking with rage. Enough. Are you going to keep lying to me? You're not my father. Why did you lie to me? The color drained from Robert's face as he tried to form a defense. But Candy, who was already past her breaking point, threw the paternity test results right in his face. What is there to explain? Robert's expression changed dramatically, but he forced himself to remain calm. Candy, even if I'm not your biological father, I still raised you. How can you be so disrespectful? But Candy just repeated her question, her voice rising. Answer me. It was Sonny who saved me. Why did you tell me it was Ethan? Do you have any idea what you made me do? I could have been happy. I was supposed to be happy. Candy's face was a twisted mask of anguish. I stood to the side, half afraid she was about to strangle him. But it was a question I also wanted answered, so I spoke up quietly. From the day I became your son-in-law, I never harmed you or treated you with anything but respect. So why would you go to such lengths to create this lie, to destroy my life and my marriage to Candy? Was it for Ethan? But your lies sent him to prison for years, too. Robert just glared at me, his face filled with hatred, and said nothing. But in his glare, I could sense something more. His hatred for me went deeper than just Ethan's death. Candy, so what if Sonny saved you? You were in love with Ethan, weren't you? You two were so good together. You would have done anything for him. Does it really matter who the real hero was? Candy shot a nervous glance in my direction. When she saw my dark expression, she flew into a rage at her father. Shut up, just shut up. I don't love Ethan. I don't love him. If you don't tell me, I'll go to the police and confess everything. I'll tell them this whole plan was your idea. Robert's eyes widened in panic. You wouldn't dare. But I cut in calmly. There's no need to argue. I've already called the police. Since you don't want to talk to us, you can talk to them. Robert's pupils contracted sharply. Two young, uniformed police officers walked into the room. Robert Hayes, we need to ask you a few questions. To my surprise, Robert was incredibly stubborn. No matter what the officers asked, he refused to say a word. This went on for days. But he never expected that Candy, whose entire world had collapsed, would confess to everything. She detailed the entire plot to frame me and steal my identity. And most importantly, she detailed every crime Robert had committed. Robert's expression finally changed. He understood that if he kept resisting, he would die in prison. He confessed everything. It was 2 weeks later when the police finally told me the whole story. Candy was sent to prison for her role in the conspiracy. I was cleared of any wrongdoing. I took the money Candy had stolen and used it to buy back my family home. I drove back to my hometown. I pushed open the dusty doors of the old house and made my way up to the attic. From inside a rusty metal box, I pulled out a yellowed, old photograph. In it, 3 people stood with their arms around each other. My father, my mother, and a young Robert Hayes. This was over 20 years ago, before my parents were even a couple. Robert Hayes had been my mother's fiancé. He was a violent alcoholic who beat her. She was always covered in bruises. When my father found out, he was furious. He confronted Robert and beat him badly. My mother fell in love with my father and finally found the courage to leave Robert. But Robert didn't see it as his fault. He saw it as a betrayal. He threatened to ruin my mother's reputation unless my father left the company they had started together, demanding he walk away with nothing. For my mother's sake, my father agreed. He left the company without a penny. They got married, and soon after I was born, because they had left all their money behind with Robert. My parents were forced to move back to the mountains to live a simple life. But Robert was no businessman. After my father left, the company quickly failed and went bankrupt. Furious, Robert blamed my parents for his failure. He tracked them down to their new home. One day, when my father was away, he broke in and tried to assault my mother. My father returned just in time to stop him. But my mother, who had already suffered years of his abuse, was deeply depressed. The trauma of the attack was too much for her. She had a severe panic attack and took her own life. My father never reported it to the police. He never spoke of it again. He became a quiet man, focusing only on raising me and building a new fortune for my future. He waited until the day Robert Hayes got married. Then he paid him a visit. He told Robert's new wife everything about his past. The woman, feeling betrayed and deceived, had complications during childbirth and died on the operating table, leaving behind a single son, Ethan. He took his mother's last name, Cole. Robert never forgave him. He took his son, Ethan, and found where my father and I were living. He started a fight with my father. During the struggle, a young Ethan pushed my father into the river, where he drowned. A local girl, Candy, saw the whole thing. In her panic to get away, she fell from a ledge and hit her head, losing her memory. That was when I found her and saved her. To ensure her silence, Robert adopted Candy and sent his own son, Ethan, overseas. When I finally learned the truth about this long history, I went to visit Robert in prison. I asked him why he didn't just kill me too. He spat back with pure hatred. Your father stole my wife, so I made my son steal yours. I was even willing to let my own son suffer for it. But I still don't get it. How did you figure it all out? Robert's face was a mask of rage. That's an answer he'll never get. He was sentenced to life in prison for his many crimes. After the dust had settled, I went to visit Candy one last time. She was much quieter than I remembered. Learning Robert's true reason for raising her seemed to have lessened some of her guilt toward me. We sat in silence for a long time. As I was getting up to leave, she finally broke down in tears and whispered, "I'm sorry, Sonny. I'm so sorry for what I did to you. I should be the one begging for your forgiveness. You were the biggest victim in all of this. If I had just trusted you a little more, or paid a little more attention, I would have seen that scar on your leg. I'm not going to make excuses. I had fallen in love with someone else. I am sorry. I don't have the right to see you again. I just hope you can be happy in the future." Candy and I finalized our divorce. I never saw her again. I quietly left that city behind. Maybe I'll need the rest of my life to come to terms with what happened. Or maybe I never will. But either way, life goes on.